Hi guys, my name is Bobby and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm doing my February wrap-up. February ended up being a great reading month for me. I ended up reading 8 books, better than last month. I kind of got on a roll and got into like one of those whoosh. Oh, there was a little bit of a hump at the start of the month, but then I just got into this routine and this roll, and I got in a really good reading mood and ended up reading 8 books. Not too bad for a month that has, 2 to 3 less days in it than other months, so let's get into the wrap-up. So the first book that I read was one that I finished. I had been reading it in the month of January, but I finished it in the month of February, and that's Verity by Colleen Hoover. Now, Colleen Hoover and I have kind of a complicated relationship, and she's kind of controversial here on BookTube. Colleen Hoover tends to write a lot of books with really toxic romantic relationships. Bad. Abuse of all kinds, physical, mental, emotional. She writes really toxic relationships. Some of them she does well. There was one I read that she did well. Some of them she doesn't handle very well. So I was curious going into this one because this is not one of those books. This is I wouldn't call it a mystery. It's kind of a thriller. And like a domestic thriller would be a good way to put it. And I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. So Verity is a story of a woman named Lowen who... She's a writer, and she's not that great of a writer. Well, that sounds terrible. She's an okay writer, but she's one of those writers that she's not really good socially. She doesn't have good people skills, so her books haven't really taken off because she doesn't like to do like the publicity tours and the signing tours and all that stuff, which helps get you out there and helps get your book noticed and get people excited about your book. And she just doesn't like to do that. She doesn't like dealing with people. She would rather... just not do it at all. And so because of that, her sales have suffered, and, she's had a hard time. So the book starts out with a bang. So when the book starts out, Lowen is going to a meeting with her agent, I believe it is, at this big, huge office building, and I don't remember what city it is, but in this big city or whatever, and she's walking and on her way there, and she's really nervous and upset because they didn't option her for another book, and so she's worried, like, how am I gonna make money? Like, she's literally being evicted from her apartment because the last year or so she was taking care of her mother who was dying from cancer, and it's used up all of her financial reserves. So her next book didn't get picked up. She's out of money. What is she gonna do? And she's on the way to this meeting going, okay, hopefully this is something that will help me. So she's standing on the edge of the curb, and there's a bunch of people, and she's totally in her head. And she witnesses a hit-and-run accident. So this guy just walks out into the street, and he's not paying attention. He gets hit by a car, and she literally witnesses his head being squished by a tire. Like, it's really traumatic. She's close enough to where she gets sprayed, like with gore, and she's really freaked out. And at first I was like, whoa, this is not like normal Colleen Hoover. Holy shit. But she's immediately like, ah! And so this guy who happens to be there with her, or like standing there on the sidewalk on the curb waiting to cross as well, helps her, takes her into this coffee shop, into the bathroom, helps her clean up. They talk a little bit. They kind of have this little bit of a bond where you're like, oh, maybe this is going to be the love interest, or whatever. They kind of bond over this like shared trauma, and he gives her his shirt, his button-up shirt, because her shirt is destroyed and she's on her way to this meeting, and he gives her his shirt. So they have this connection in the bathroom, and then they part ways. She's wearing his shirt. She feels really grateful because he was very kind, but she's still really shooken up. She ends up getting to the building. She goes upstairs, gets in the room where they're with her agent, and they're waiting, and who walks in but the guy that helped her out in the bathroom and saw the accident. And what the proposition is they want Lowen to... There's a famous author named Verity, and they would like Lowen to finish her series. Apparently, Verity was in a really bad car accident a couple years prior, and she is pretty much bedridden, and they don't want everybody to know that. They don't want her fans to know that. So they'd like Lowen to ghostwrite for her. Like, they'll pay her a huge lump sum, and write under a pseudonym, like saying that they're writing together, but Verity really has nothing to do with it because she's bedridden, and they will pay her a handsome sum, blah, blah, blah. So she agrees, and a part of it is that she has to go out to Verity's house and go through her manuscripts, go through like her notes in her office to try to figure out where she's taking the series and like all this stuff. And Verity's husband, Jeremy, was the very nice man who helped her after seeing that car accident, and so he is also out there and with her. And the story kind of takes off from there. So this story takes place, it takes place mostly at Verity's house, and it's kind of out in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere. It was really good. It wasn't like a whodunit mystery. It was kind of like, it was psychological, because as Lowen is there, she finds this manuscript for like a autobiography that Verity was writing, and as Lowen starts to read it to kind of figure out more about her as a person, she starts learning a lot of things that she probably didn't want to know, and it gets kind of dark and stuff like that, but it was a really, really good book. There are a couple trigger warnings for child abuse. Well, obviously the car accident in the beginning, you know, that's the only gore in the entire book. Child abuse, there's explicit sex scenes, there's child death, 2 instances of child death, and physical and emotional, mostly physical child abuse. So huge trigger warnings for that. But it was good. I really, really liked it. I liked the way the story ended. I like the way she ended the story. It kind of made things not open-ended, but like where the reader has to make a choice about what they have to make a choice about what was actually the truth and what's not. Like you get kind of two things, and it's like, okay, but who do you believe? And like, you know, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. Totally different from a normal Colleen Hoover book. If you like Colleen Hoover and you've read her other things, like her other romantic things, and you want something that's a little bit darker, or a lot bit darker, I would pick up Verity. It was really easy to read. I really, really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it if you're a Colleen Hoover fan, or if you're looking to kind of, I wouldn't say if you're looking to get into Colleen Hoover, because this is nothing like what she regularly writes, but you know, it's a great little psychological thriller. So I would highly recommend it. You guys check it out. The next book that I read ended up being a DNF, and one of 2 DNFs this month. And I got about 100 pages into this, almost, yeah, just over 100 pages. And sadly, that book was Haven by Tom Deedy. This was my buddy read with Vicky at chapter 32, and she ended up DNFing it as well. It was formulaic, it was boring, it was literally a carbon copy of It or Summer of Night by Dan Simmons. It was the exact same thing. You know, there's an older guy that comes home, he's had a shit life, blah, 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 blah. There was monsters or something killing the kids in the town, and so there's this group of kids, this motley group of kids that are going to figure out what's happening. It was lame, it was stupid, it was very formulaic, it was boring, like nothing happened. The creature was a water monster, and they only got you when you got near the water, so it's kind of like, well, just don't go near the water. Like, yeah, Vicky and I were both like, so it was a DNF. I didn't rate it because it was a DNF. I don't find that fair unless I made it I don't think I rated it. I might have given it 2 stars. I don't think I rated it. It was just kind of like one of those ones where it's like, you know, I don't really find it fair if I've only made it 100 pages in to rate it. But yeah, DNF. The next book I read was The Beast House by Richard Lehman. I did a full review on this. It's kind of a crappy, it's better than my Beware review, but I did a review on this. You can check the video out if you'd like, but I'm not going to talk about it here. I rated it 3 stars and liked it better than The Cellar, but it's still The Beast House trilogy, so it's not my favorite. So you can check out the video if you'd like to know more of my thoughts. The next book that I read was one that I picked up on a whim. Like, it was one of those ones where like, I have to buy it, and I did. Sorry about the shaking. Cat. So I decided to buy it, and I read it, and it broke me, and that's The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This has gone around BookTube a whole bunch of people have read this. There's not much I can say that hasn't already been said. This is a World War II story. Takes place in present time, but the present time place is very small, very minuscule, smaller chapters. This 90% of this book takes place in World War II France, World War II occupied France, and it follows 2 sisters, Vianne and Isabel, as they work their way through World War II and the shit the Germans do, and how the Germans invaded France, and all the shit they did. And it is absolutely heartbreaking, and it was very fucking hard to read. And I don't cry during books, and this did not make me cry. It made me emotional. It made me sick to my stomach. I don't cry during books. I'm not a crier, but this book broke me. Like, just, I have a hard time reading World War II fiction, or World War II is shit at all. Anything that mentions the Holocaust or the genocide by the Nazis just gets me right in the feels. It gets me worse than anything. Like, the senseless amount of death for no reason other than the religious beliefs. I can't do it. And it just makes me sick. Makes me feel sick, and I have a hard time reading about it because I just get over emotional and angry and frustrated, and Kristen Hanna is such an amazing writer, and the way she wrote these women, like, they're both powerful in their own ways. They both go through some traumatic shit. I mean, you have Vienne, who is the older sister, who is married, has a family, has a house. I mean, her family, she has one kid at the start of the book. And all this, you have her perspective, where her husband gets shipped off to war, and she is stuck in this house alone with her daughter, and there's a German soldier that has to board with her because they invade the town, and they, you know, you have to board them. And then you have, so she deals with more domestic struggle and just trying to keep her, you know, head above water and under the radar at the same time. And so you have her dynamic. Then you have Isabel, and Isabel is the polar opposite of Vienne, of her sister. She's younger, she's feisty, she's like, fuck the Germans, we are going to resist them, like, and she joins the resistance. And so you have, you know, what she's doing is very dangerous, and then what Vienne's doing is also dangerous, because she's pretty much sleeping with the enemy without actually sleeping with the enemy, because they're right next to her, and she can't say anything or they'll kill her and her daughter. So, and then you've got Isabel, who is with the resistance, so any steps she takes or any wrong move she makes, oh my god, wow, that's a Bobby Brown song lyric. Oh. Okay, anyways, so she can be killed as well, and it is the trauma these women go through, the absolute trauma. And the present day is a woman who is elderly, and it's one of the sisters, you just aren't told which sister it is until the end, is one of the sisters telling the story, and she has, is it cancer? I think she has like end stage cancer. She's going into hospice, and her son is helping her move out of her house and all that and into the home. And she gets a steamer trunk. There's a steamer trunk. She starts going through some stuff, and he starts asking questions about what this is, and it's about stuff in the war. And she starts telling the story of the sisters, and it is, it's like Kristen Hanna purposely writes shit just to fuck with your emotions. But it is so emotionally powerful. It is, but it also empowering at the same time. I mean, it's sad, and the shit they go through is just fucked up, but it's empowering at the same time. Like, both of these women persevere, and it's just, so there's so much strength and hope and all of that, and through it, while also on the flip side there's despair, and you see all this terrible stuff happening at the same time, where there's times where I had to just set the book down and walk away for a day. Like, it was just so intense, and the emotions were so strong. It made you feel so strong. Like, you were, like, I felt like I was right there with them, and it just made you feel so much, where you had to set it down. Like, it's just too much. I can't do it. I need to set this down and walk away. 5 stars, obviously. 5 stars. And this, after finishing this, I went and bought 3 more Kristen Hanna books, because I could not help myself. Absolutely love this book. Please go read this. Like, if you are curious about this, or about Kristen Hanna, I strongly suggest you read it. Yes, it's a huge book. It's over 500 pages, but it goes so fast because you're so invested. I think if you're going to read any Kristen Hanna, it needs to be The Nightingale, and everybody needs to read it. There's a reason why they're turning it into a movie. It was absolutely beautiful and heartbreaking. The next book that I read in February was one I kind of picked up on a whim. It was one I'd seen, like, very few people talked about. It kept popping up on my Goodreads, and so I decided that it sounded really interesting because the topic fascinated me. And that's The Girls at 17 Swan Street by Yara, I'm not going to pronounce that name, Zahib, like, but this is a book all about eating disorders. So, heavy trigger warning. If eating disorders or anything about eating disorders trigger you, I would highly recommend going into this book with caution or skipping it entirely. It is very specific. It takes place 90% of the time in an eating disorder clinic. So everything, like, in the process of how they do things and help these girls heal is very laid out for you. And so that would be very triggering for someone who either suffers from an eating disorder or has in the past. But this was a really great story. I gave it 4 stars. This tells the story of, can't remember her name, Anna. Anna, who met her husband in Paris, and they fell madly in love, and her husband gets transferred to the United States for work, and I think they go to Detroit, I believe it is. And so she moves with him. He moves first, and then she follows him like 4 or 5 months after. And once they end up in the United States, she develops anorexia. And it's mostly because, as you read through the story, because she is lonely. Like, he works all the time. She has no friends in America. And, you know, all of her family and friends are back home. And So she decides to limit her food, and she gets down to, I think it's 89 pounds when the story starts. So through the story, like, the way it's written is kind of, I don't know what this is actually called, but where there's like a lot of spacing in between, like, so it reads super fast. The chapters are pretty short. In between the chapters, there's little, it's almost like progress reports of how she's doing at the clinic. It was a really hopeful story. Like, it was very interesting to see how they treat eating disorders, or how this one in particular. And reading it, how well this was done, I'm almost wondering if it's a little bit of own voices, like if maybe the author the author knows what she's talking about. But Anna's journey was really sad. But it was really good and hopeful as well. Like, when she comes to the realization that she wants to get healthy, she wants to get better, she wants this to end. It was really good, and I've read it in 2 sittings, I think. It was a phenomenal story. Like, if you're curious at all about eating disorders, or like how the treatment for eating disorders works, I would recommend picking it up. Anna's husband, Matthias, was very, very, very sweet. He stood by her the entire time. It was really nice to see a healthy relationship. I mean, their relationship was healthy to begin with, but when her eating disorder started, he did what a lot of people do and kind of swept it under the rug and ignored it and pretend like it wasn't there. Like, if I pretend it's not there, it'll go away. And like, let her be in her disorder. But when she goes into treatment and he's there, he comes and visits her every single day, and, you know, is very supportive and there for her throughout the entire thing. And it was really nice to see that. But yeah, there's a lot of trigger warnings. If eating disorders at all trigger you, be very careful. But if you're curious about the subject, I would recommend it. I really enjoyed it. It was very nice. It was a very fulfilling read. It's hard to say nice considering it's a book about anorexia or eating disorders in general. There's a couple girls in the story and at the disorder clinic who have bulimia, but the main focus is on anorexia, and it was a good book. It was very powerful, kind of hard to read sometimes, like trying to put yourself in that mental state like these girls are. I highly recommend it if you're interested in the topic at all. Okay, the next 3 books were on my Thriller-a-thon TBR. I had 4 on my TBR. I read 3. I'm pretty proud of myself because, you know, I have no focus or drive most of the time when it comes. But then again, readathons, if I commit myself to a readathon, like, I go balls to the wall and I try to read as much as possible, unless something big happens and I'm not able to do that. But I was able to get through 2.5, I'm going to say, or yeah, 2.5, because I got about a third of the way into The Girl on the Ice and did not finish it. I'm continuing that into next month. And then I have 1 like solid DNF in here, and then 2 that I finished. So let's get into the first one. The first one I finished was Watching You by Lisa Jewell. I'd already talked about this one. This was already on my TBR for February. So I ended up reading this one. This one is really good. I gave this one 4 stars as well. This one I like better than I Found You. I read I Found You by Lisa Jewell last month. I only have 1 other of her books, and it's buried in the closet somewhere. But this was really good. This centers around like this neighborhood, and it follows three main perspectives. And it all centers around Tom Fitzwilliam. Tom Fitzwilliam is the main, I wouldn't call him the main character, but he's like the central focus of the story. So all the 3 people that are telling the story, one is his son, Frankie. There is a woman named Jo who lives with her husband and her brother and sister-in-law in a house 2 doors down from Tom Fitzwilliam. She's her and her husband like met in Ibiza. They're like in love, but they just got married on a whim, but they don't really have like real people jobs, and so they moved back, and they had to live with her brother and sister-in-law for a while until they get on their feet. They live 2 doors down from him, and then you have Jenna, who is a 17-year-old girl, I think, and her mom has schizophrenia. I mean, it's never explicitly said on the page, but she's very paranoid. She freaks out all the time. She thinks people are watching her. She thinks people are stalking her. It's all the signs of schizophrenia, and she's dealing with that with her mom, and she doesn't really want anybody to know because she doesn't want to be taken away from her mom. So you've got like these 3 main people telling the story. I'm going to turn off my phone notifications. So you have these 3 people telling the story of Tom Fitzwilliam, pretty much. I mean, he doesn't get a perspective, but he's in every single one of these stories. And you start out the book and somebody's dead, and you don't know who, and you don't know who did it. So there's a body on the floor, and just says prologue, and then once you get past that and you start, it goes back in time, and so you just get the date on the top, and then you're working up to the day of whoever got killed. And you start, you know, trying to unravel who got killed, why, and, you know, who did it. So throughout this story, like, it was good. I was engaged. I did not understand why everybody was so obsessed with Tom Fitzwilliam. Like, he did not seem like somebody I didn't understand. Like, because Jo, the female character who's, like, in her mid-20s, she's, like, obsessed with Tom. Like, she's got this, like, lustful obsession over him, which is just really weird. Jenna doesn't really care for him. She thinks that he's creepy or a creeper. Like, thinks that he's, like, you know, because he's a teacher, like one of those teachers that preys on his teenage students. Like, she kind of gets that vibe, and she's just kind of and then his son has issues of his own. So, okay, I'm gonna, just so you guys know, I'm gonna go into spoilers just a little bit, because I need to talk about a couple things that I didn't really care for in this book. So, for, you know, spoilers, just letting you know for right now. While the book is being held up, there's spoilers once I put it down. If you don't want spoilers, you can mute me, whatever. So here we go, spoilers starting now. So Frankie has autism, and he's on the autistic spectrum. He has Asperger's. They literally say on the page that he has Asperger's. You do not find that out until the end of the book. What pisses me off is I have a son who's autistic, and what really irritated me is in the beginning of the book, Frankie is pretty much shown as like a creeper. He stalks women from his window. He takes zoom lenses and he takes pictures of them and videotapes them and records them without their permission, like a voyeur. I mean, nothing's perverted. It's not like they're not naked or anything like that, but it's an invasion of privacy and really creepy. And they make him out to be this fucking nasty creep. And then literally, like in the last 100 pages, they go, oh, by the way, he has autism. He has Asperger's. He's on the autism spectrum. And we just forgot to tell you. Okay, that's not okay with me. You can't put him out to be this really creepy, messed up in the head teenage kid when in actuality he has a mental disorder. Like, he has a learning disability disorder that makes it so he doesn't understand what he's doing is wrong. And the way it's written, it makes it seem like he knows it's wrong and he's being really creepy and no, he doesn't understand it's wrong. He just really likes these girls. Oh, pissed me off. Pissed me off. I was not happy. So, yeah, no, nope, not happy at all. So that's probably why I only gave it 4 stars, because I really enjoyed the story, but that pissed me off. Absolutely pissed me off. And then there was another kind of hard twist. Like, I saw the twist coming, knew what was happening. It was kind of thrown out there. It was kind of like I Found You, where you could kind of see it coming. The writing was on the wall. It was all right, but that Asperger's thing, man, bad. There's not many books with good autism Asperger's rep. And I mean, I know this is a thriller, but okay, spoilers done. To wrap up, Watching You, it was great, 4 stars. I recommend you guys read it. I figured out the twist a little bit before. It was like about midway I figured it out. Didn't ruin my enjoyment for me. Like, I still kind of want to know the backstory. It kind of, I mean, if you don't find the red herrings, and I'm one of those ones where I'm constantly looking for them, if you don't see the red herrings, then it takes a hard left when you figure out what actually had happened. Like, you've got an idea, and it goes, Beep. So, highly enjoyable. I liked it better than I Found You. Lisa Jewell's kind of becoming one of those auto-read authors. After reading 2 of her books, I really enjoyed both of them. Highly recommend you check it out. So the next book that I read was one that I DNF'd, not going to talk much about it, and that was Baby Teeth by Zoji Stage. Leanne from Literary Diversions also DNF'd this, but in the UK it's called Bad Apple, I think. Yeah, this was just not good. It was her debut. She's trying to make it creepy, like Children of the Corn, like this child, I think her name is Hannah, if I remember right. Yeah, Hannah. What is it with sociopaths named Hannah? She's a sociopath, psychopath, and is even not a child. She's got an unhealthy obsession with her father and hates her mother, and that's about it. Nothing really happens. At the end of the, like, I started reading, I was like, God, this is stupid. Like, how is the dad totally dumb and not understanding this? You know, like, how is this girl who's literally like 6 years old got this much brain power to be this much of a psychotic? And then, so I just went to the end and skimmed, and at the end, it's pretty much Hannah's in this institution, trying to manipulate her parents to go home. Nothing really happened, and it's just her parents fucking a lot. And I was like, no. Like, this could have been done really, really well. And I just don't think it was executed well. So, DNF. I DNF'd it at like 50 pages. It is now being on hold. The last thing I finished in the month of February, I literally finished it. I'm filming this on the 28th. I finished it yesterday, and that's Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. This was fantastic. This was a 4-star book. This tells the story of Gio, or Georgina, and at the start of the book, she's high-paying not CEO. I think she's engaged to the CEO, but she's like high up in this pharmaceutical company, makes 6 figures a year, high 6 figures, totally like career woman, whatever, and she gets arrested for murder of her best friend from 16 years prior, and it's intense, and it kind of goes from there. So you get alternating perspectives from Gio, who, while she's in prison, she gets 5 years in prison, so you get a little bit of her prison, like, and it's not very long. This book is literally 304 pages, and in the beginning, like, I'm like, oh, we're gonna get a little bit of her in prison. No, I mean, that's literally like 2 or 3 chapters, and then she's out. So, like, that's one thing that bothered me about this book, is the time jumps were really abrupt and quick, and you don't really get any notice. It doesn't say, like, 2 years later, whatever. You just, it kind of throws you into, like, 2 or 3 years later, and you have to read and go, oh, okay, and get oriented to where you're at, time-wise. And then it also follows the detective named Kaiser, who they call him Kai, and he is one of Georgina's best friends from the time she was in high school. So they know each other as well. But her friend, her best friend that was murdered, she had a part in it, and her boyfriend named Calvin was a serial killer. He was the sweet-based strangler is what they called him, and her best friend was his first victim, and she was involved in it to a degree, and that's why she went to prison and all that, and he ends up going to prison as well, but he escapes, and then you get new murders that are cropping up right before she's set to be released, and so they're worried, is she talking to Calvin, like, has she not detached, like, what's going on? And then it kind of takes off from there. It was a really good story. It's very fast paced. Like, you don't want to put it down. Like, it moves. Like, there is no lag. Like, it moves. And it was very fast paced. Did I figure out the ending? Yeah, I did. It wasn't like one of those disappointing, like Riley Sager books where it's like, really, dude, page 8. A little bit past halfway and I started figuring it out. I like Kai and Gio's relationship. You can tell Kai has a huge crush on Gio and has since high school. And so you're kind of rooting for them to get together because they both had, you know, interesting lives. I mean, so that was kind of cute, but it wasn't like a focus. But the climax was done very well. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I would highly recommend it if you haven't read Jar of Hearts already. Like, I mean, the end was really kind of stereotypical, and it's kind of an out that authors have used before, but I liked the ride getting there. Like, the premise was very interesting and a little bit unique, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I highly recommend it to anybody who's looking for a nice, quick thriller, because, I mean, literally, 304 pages. Okay, guys, that's it. Those are the 8 books that I read in the month of February. Please let me know down below if you've read any of these books and what you've thought of them, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.